We have these two texts, and these two texts have two things, one very apparent and one a little less apparent, in common. The first is a need for water, and the second is that this is not about water. Our first text comes from Exodus 17. Little quick sense of where we are in the Exodus story. Exodus 3 is when Moses is called to go save the people from Egypt. Exodus 5 through 11 is all the plague stuff. 12 is when the Israelites are freed by Egypt. 14 is when they're being chased down by Pharaoh and get to cross the Red Sea. 15 starts in jubilation and then ends in the water here is really bitter. We'd like better water. 16 is we're really hungry and Moses feeds them with quail. 17, where we are, is we're thirsty again. And they're going to be thirsty again and hungry again and then thirsty again and then thirsty again and then probably thirsty again. And they're going to go on for that for like 3 more books. So we're here at the beginning of this question about thirsty. I find it fascinating, in fact, that not only is there a conversation about wet stones, you can see in your work of art. On Wednesday night, we did not come to any consensus about what is being rendered there. But personally, I kind of like the idea that it's Moses and 2 of the elders peering into the water coming forth from the rocks. But I love the interplay, if you will, between the fact that Moses says, they're going to stone me, in which the stones are an agent of death, and God who makes those stones an agent for life by bringing water from them, right? God takes what we give God and God turns it to good. But the people really aren't so sure about that. Why did you yank us out of slavery where everything was good, just to have us die in the wilderness? I mean, yes, we've already seen the miracle of turning the Mara into sweet water and the quail all, dying right in front of us so we could have a really great meal, but we still don't trust that there will be water. The single, to me, most important element of this text comes in the final verse. The final verse, so naming is important in the scriptural text, always. And Moses goes to name the spring and the area where this happens. Place names in Israel always reflect the narrative of what happened there. So if you had an Old Testament map of Israel, you would literally have scripture in front of you as it would recount the narrative of the people with God through the place names on the map. The name here is about contention and testing God. And what is that final question it says the people asked? I'm asking you. Is the Lord among us or not? Now, did you ever hear the people ask that question? Did you? I mean, we read that text. It was short enough to retain what we read, right? Unlike the John text. They never asked that question. They asked, where's the water? We're thirsty. But Moses says, what you're asking is God among us or not? So it won't matter whether it's about the Red Sea or about the bitter waters of the Mara, or about the quail, or about the manna, or about the water, and the water. It is never about those things. Those are simply what they're willing to talk about. But underlying these complaints are the question, is God still with us? Yes, we know God was with us yesterday, but is God still with us? On a side note, when your kids are asking, are we there yet? They really just want to be there. They are not asking if God is with them, but maybe. I don't know how you drive. So we have this conversation in which we have to talk about the question that's being asked as opposed to the question that is really yearning to be answered. And Moses sees right through that. Jesus is always also pretty good at seeing through what is going on in any moment. So we find Jesus coming to the well, and he is having this conversation with the Samaritan woman. I have a couple issues with the text, among them the fact that we are in Samaria at a Samaritan well. He should be the Jewish man, and she should just be the woman. It's obvious she's a Samaritan. But we want to ramp up the division that's here. That's the text wants us to understand the sense of division. In fact, she points out not just that she's a Samaritan, but what else? I'm a woman, right? He's actually going to uncover further complications to whether he should want to sit with her or not. I kind of love how this happens from the disciples' side. My son's working the stream today, so I'm going to make it really hard for him to stay on me. Because they're kind of off in the side wings, and they run out, right? They come back from the city, and they go, he's talking to a woman, a Samaritan woman. He must really need something. You go. I mean, it's kind of like when, again, I don't know what your car rides are like. It's kind of like when the kids gather around and like, Dad's in a mood, you go talk to him. Right? So the disciples kind of run up and they hang off on the sides, right? The text even points out, they don't say anything. They don't want to say anything because this isn't supposed to happen. And they're not yet sure, I imagine, maybe because it's John 4, but I'm pretty sure if it was John 44, they wouldn't be acting any different because we always want more water. They're like, I don't know that I want to walk into this scene. I don't know that I want to be associated with this moment in time. There's just too many taboos being walked all over. And so they hang out here and they're like, I wasn't the one supposed to take care of lunch. That must have been you. And look, now because you forgot lunch, we had to go in the city. This has had to happen. Right? And they're muttering off here. I mean, I know that we're not the kind of church where people mutter about other people, ever. But it's a churchy kind of thing. It's a churchy kind of thing happening here between the Samaritans and the Jews, too. I was recounting at first light, about 15 years ago, I was at a Presbyterian meeting that had welcomed Charles Wiley, who worked for the Office of Theology and Worship. And he pointed out with lament that when we go to do interfaith and interdenominational joint stuff as Presbyterian Church USA members, the people we never call up to get together with in relationship are the other Presbyterian denominations. We'll call up the Lutherans. The Methodists are okay, you know. Sorry, we got a couple of them running around here. You know, we can handle the sanctimoniousness of our Catholic brothers and sisters. Well, brothers. We can do all those things, and we will, but we won't call the PCA church, right? We won't call the people with whom we actually theologically have the most in common, except that one thing we fought about, tooth and nail. And now we've made that like a line through the sun that cannot be crossed. Jesus is crossing that line right now, and his disciples are so worked up about it, they're hanging out over here, figuring out who, if anyone's going to go offer Jesus some food. The question of our week is, will you give me a drink? I struggle with the question because I don't actually think that's the question these texts are inviting us to wrestle with. Those are the presented questions. But Jesus, in the text, never gets his drink of water, nor does he need it. He's actually very clear to the disciples he doesn't need their food and he doesn't need her water. He is living on something else. But his question is still important because it's the question he uses to engage her where she is. The artist of our artwork today on this made a point. If you didn't read the artist's statement, she reflects that most artwork done about the woman at the well puts Jesus up above and her down below, like she's kneeling at the well and he's standing over her. Because it turns out that's what we do at church. I stand over you and preach the word of God to you. And Jesus stands over people and enlightens them. She reads into this. She said, he gets himself down on her level. Right? It's why I like to wander around. And made a point of putting her eyes at exactly the same level in the artwork as Jesus' eyes. From here, they cross boundaries. It's not crossing boundaries if Jesus stays over here and says, "Do you want the water I have to give you?" It's crossing boundaries if he gets down on her level and begins to see her for who she is. Woman and Samaritan are not who she is, right? Those are the categories of divide we expect to see in her. Jesus walked right past those before he said his first words. He then teases out from her with this random question. What does the husband have to do with anything, after all? In fact, we did the whole me as male Jew engaging you as female Samaritan. We don't really need the husband. But he says, because he's trying to dig at something deeper than just a glass of water, bring your husband. And she says, I don't have a husband. He says, you're right, you've had 5. There's a meme I love that has someone asking, what book are you reading? And I'm like, I'm not really reading a book right now. And the person responds, you are right to say that, because there are 5 unread books on your desk. And the book you are not reading right now is also not being read. She says to him this depth of revelation. She has already, she is feeling seen, and she goes full on confessional. I always kind of sort of apologize when I go to my well visit with my doctor, because it's the closest I get to going into like Catholic confession. I've shared this with you before. Like, I look at my doctor and I don't say like, so how's it looking, doctor? I say, here's all the things wrong with me. I'm sorry, I'm a terrible person. And she kind of goes into that mode without him even asking. He asks a single prompting question, and then he unveils, I already knew all that. And that too did not stop me from asking you for water. And then she wants what he has. I need that living water. I can't help but imagine That part of her having five, we don't know. They could have all died early deaths. There could be an innocuous sense. But the realm, the way it's presented as if there's something wrong about her five husbands or her having five husbands makes you wonder that there's a deeper story there. Jesus doesn't care about the deeper story, right? But there's a sense to which this is a woman who has been looking for external validation. Who among us is not looking for a little external validation? Who among us is not, when we are feeling lonely or when we are feeling incomplete or when we are feeling disquieted, is not trying to fill the void in our own hearts with something that is out there? She has been trying to fill the lack that is experienced in her life with everything she can get her hands on, and the next day, guess what? She's still thirsty. If you drink the water from that well, you'll be thirsty again tomorrow. If you drink the water I have for you, it will be an eternal spring bubbling up within you. She will become the living water. It's not just that living water will happen. She will become the spring of living water. And we begin to already experience that in the text. John's gospel loves to point out, come and see, go and tell. It's this movement that happens throughout John's gospel. She does this exact thing. A spark has been created in her. The thing Nicodemus saw in Jesus last week is happening now in her. She has become the spring of living water. So she runs out to her people. And it doesn't matter whether she had status in that world or not. She says to them, "He knew everything about me." He asked one question. It's hardly everything, but he asked the most important question that got to the core of what makes her thirsty. And so he knew her completely. And she tells them that, and they can see it. I'm sure they can feel the mists of living water coming off of her. And then they come running. Come and see. Go and tell. It's important that the texts tell us by the end they no longer believe because of her testimony. They believe because they've seen it for themselves and they feel it for themselves. So the question, I think, these texts, both of these texts, one that is about water but is really about God's presence, and one that is about my thirst but it's really about your thirst, is, do we really know what we're seeking? We began, there's a cloth out there to prove it, we began this Lenten journey asking, what are you seeking? And we all wrote things on that garment, or maybe you weren't quite ready for that kind of vulnerability, so you didn't, or you're a little too Presbyterian, so you don't go for those public things. But we were asked, what is it that you're seeking this season? And we gave an answer. And I think this is the week we stop and say, did we give the right answer? Did we really listen to the question? If you ask me, if you're on a committee and ask me, can we do a church survey? I'll tell you no. Because if I surveyed you right now, how many of you want to go to come to my Wednesday night Bible study? 87.5% of you will say, me! And the other 13 just weren't paying attention. But on Wednesday, I will not have 100 people at Bible study because you're giving the answer you think I want to hear, or the answer you think you really want. Jesus wants to get past all that to the answer that's really going on. What is it you're seeking? And are you looking in the right places to find that? Because if we're just filling a vacancy in our lives with all the things quick to hand, we will be thirsty again tomorrow. God is with us yesterday, today, and tomorrow to say, what are you seeking? Engage with me as I engage with you, eye to eye. And let's be honest about our answers as I fill that void within you and you know peace. What are you seeking?